Hello and welcome to episode 22 of season 2 of Unlimited Opinions. I'm Adam Bishop.
I'm Mark Bishop.
And we are, of course, reading Jake Jackson's Myths and Legends, a book summarizing world mythologies from around the world. We are still focusing on Indian mythologies, and this time we are covering some of the tales of the Mahabharata, the longest epic poem ever written in any language. And this is a very, very short snippet of some very, very short stories of the Mahabharata, so not exactly a full, comprehensive look at the entire work. Very, very small selection here.
Yeah, I'm not going to read that whole thing.
You're not going to read the whole Mahabharata?
I'm not going to read the whole Mahabharata.
Mahabharata.
Yeah, I like how you mentioned that the book is about world mythology from throughout the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to cement the point.
I guess it could be world mythology for only half or a quarter of the world, but you clarified it from the entire world.
Yes, just so our listeners are sure about what we're talking about.
That's good. And by the way, this is also the official post-COVID, the first post-COVID podcast. The COVID is now ended and is now replaced with World War III, which has just begun this week, starting in Ukraine.
Yes.
It will spread through the rest of the world eventually, like World War I did, with various alliances and missteps and miscalculations. So we have that to look forward to. But COVID officially over.
Yes, with that uplifting note, of course, our thoughts and prayers are with Ukraine. But yes, we should, completely unrelated to the Mahabharata, but yes, that is current events, really, to date this episode very solidly.
It's not far. The India is not far from the Ukraine.
That is
than we are to India.
You are not wrong. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into the first of these stories here, and that is how the princes learn to shoot. Bhishma was the royal grandfather of the Pandava princes, and he was eager to find them a teacher to train them in the use of arms. And one day, these young Pandava princes were playing with a ball in the forests, until the ball rolled down into a well and they could not retrieve it. So they asked a nearby Brahmin named Drona for help, and he agreed, first tossing his ring into the well and promising to retrieve the ball only with a few blades of grass. Drona then threw a blade of grass like a sword into the well, where it pierced the center of the ball, and he continued throwing blades of grass with each blade piercing the one before, until he had a long chain of grass to pull up the ball. Amazed, the boys asked Drona to retrieve his ring, and so he picked up his bow and fired an arrow down the well, where it went into the center of the ring and bounced back, carrying the ring. The princes offered Drona any gift that he could ask for, but he simply told them to tell Bhishma that Drona is here. And upon hearing this, Bhishma was struck by his good fortune, for Drona was the son of the great mage Garadwaja, and he had recently been scorned by his former friend Drupada, and was now searching for pupils to teach. Bhishma immediately called Drona to teach them in arms, and on the first day of instruction, Drona asked the Pandava princes that when they became skilled, they would carry out a certain purpose he had in mind. And Arjuna, the third of the Pandavas, immediately agreed. And from then on, Drona and Arjuna had a special bond. Princes came from all other kingdoms to hear of Drona, and among them Karna, the son of a charioteer, became the rival of Arjuna, determined to always outdo him. One night while eating, a lantern blew out, and Arjuna realized that he could still eat in the dark, and so, therefore, he must still be able to shoot in the dark. And Drona praised him for this idea, declaring him to have no equal. Another traveler to Drona was Alkalvya, who was of low caste, and so Drona refused to train him, and so Alkalvya went into the forests and worshipped an image of Drona, and soon became an excellent shot, drawing Drona's attention. Drona sought him out, and Alkalvya begged him to train him, promising to pay any fee he asked for. And Drona told him that he must cut off his thumb as a fee, and Alkalvya did so at once, then realizing he could no longer use his bow. And these last couple sentences from the book itself. And so it was by these means, and others like them, that Drona ensured the supremacy of the royal princes, who had now no rivals in the use of arms. Each had a speciality, and they were all capable of fighting with resourcefulness, strength, and perseverance. So that is sort of the introduction story to these other couple stories that we're going to hear. These boys that are just the descendants of this royal line desperately need to learn how to fight, and by this good fortune they come upon Drona, who's a very sort of mystical figure, performing very superhuman-esque tasks that we see here. What do you think of this short story here?
Well, he's kind of a jerk. He says as a price to train this guy, you got to cut off your thumb. But once he cuts off his thumb, he can't be trained because he can't hold the bow anymore. What a terrible, terrible person. And no one that I would never want this person to train my sons in anything.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked by the way this story went. I was expecting Drona to be kind of the wise sort of almost father figure esque sort of person that we'd see here. But as we go on through these stories, I go into this a little bit more, but I really start rooting against him and Arjuna. Myself, I don't know the full context of the Mahabharata. Of course, I've never read the longest epic poem in the world. But from these short snippets, it really seems like we are following the bad guys almost as our protagonists. At least that's sort of the vibe that I got.
Yeah, definitely from this summary. Again, I'm never going to read this Mahabharata, but I will. From this summary, I'm rooting against him, and I was kind of hoping there'd be a story about how this guy got some sort of prosthetic and then murdered them all with his newly trained prosthetic thumb. Like First Blood, the first Rambo movie, except he didn't have a prosthetic thumb, but he went on and killed these guys. Well, I mean, he maimed them mostly, but I was looking forward to something like that, but never got that far.
Yeah, but we definitely do see this sort of setup. It's very similar, I guess, kind of to the other setups of these Indian stories. You have these group of brothers, sort of descended from royal lineage or from high important household or descended from the gods themselves even. And they kind of find a teacher. They sort of start to prove themselves. It's a very similar sort of retelling of some of these past myths that we've seen. And I think that's very interesting, just how similar some of these origin stories are. We saw similar things with Krishna before, kind of coming into his own, proving himself, training in these great arts, becoming very skilled. So why do you think, do you have any sort of theories about why these sort of tales are so similar in their beginning?
Well, I think those part of them are somewhat universal. Young students and mysterious master. Like the Karate Kid comes to mind. This mysterious guy that has powers or knowledge or learning that you didn't anticipate, and strange methods of teaching and that kind of stuff. So I think that's pretty common. Just from a general storytelling side of it, but. Yeah, it's I mean, that's my theory on it.
You're kind of going into the Jungian archetypes. Have you ever heard of Carl Jung?
I have heard of Carl Jung. I've never read his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He's a real proponent of that as Peterson.
Jordan Peterson?
Jordan Peterson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he might be a Jungian trained psychiatrist.
Yeah, I mean, when Carl Jung was kind of first looking at his theories and that sort of thing, it was really focused on mythology, sort of in the same way that Joseph Campbell was, looking at the stories we tell, what sort of similar characters keep appearing, and, why do humans keep telling stories about similar characters? And one of those characters is that mentor, that sort of wise man figure that we're kind of seeing here, a little bit with Drona. Drona's a little bit different in that he's not entirely of the highest morals, at least from our perspective. But it is interesting kind of seeing what sort of archetypes keep popping up in different cultures.
Yeah, and this one really, this section really has an emphasis on caste.
Mm-hmm.
That you have a place and you can't break out of that, which is very foreign to my ears,
mm-hmm.
because usually stories in American history are the exact opposite. You're shunned initially because of your caste or your place in society, but through your skill and cunning and studying, you overcome that and show up the other people. But that's a common story in American mythology or storytelling. Mm-hmm. Not in this one.
Well, the point about castes reminds me of one of your favorite books that you definitely did not rant about in the last season of the podcast, but Plato's Republic, which kind of describes, every single person has their own individual place, and that is where they must be, and they don't really move out of it, and they all serve this one task, and that is how the perfect society sort of functions.
Yes, it's horrible. It's a horrible concept. It's immoral. And it makes everyone give up hope, and gives a sense of entitlement to those that are in power, that they can do anything because that is their place in life, and the other people should just accept it and suffer their place in the world, which is to be murdered or raped or whatever you want to do with them, because that's their lot in life. just should accept it.
I was thinking you would say that. Thank you for bringing that back.
And I don't know a lot about Indian society, and I'm sure it's opened up a lot, but I know they had a very strong caste system, and I think they still do to a certain extent, although I think it's moderated over the years. But yeah, you're born in a certain caste, you're stuck as a beggar, and there's nothing you can do about it. No matter how brilliant you are or what you do to overcome it, you're never going to get out of that caste. Part of the reincarnation thing. You're born at that level because of the sins of the past lives, and you just have to endure it until you die, and then hopefully you'll move up the ladder next time. But that assumes there's a next time, and it assumes there's a previous life, because otherwise it's just horribly immoral and really not productive. Because then you're just, okay, well, this is just what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I mean, really, then everybody's just stagnant. No progress is ever made. It's just, this is the way things are, and that doesn't change.
Correct. Yeah, it's a huge, just from a utilitarian perspective, it's just a huge waste of human resources and human intellect and desire. I mean, there's so many examples of people that were thought as crackpots, but turned out to be, brilliant and change the world. You're not going to get that when you have that kind of society set up and that kind of fatalistic attitude. And how do you even, how are you ever going to figure out who's in their ideal place, in their proper place? And that's of course, Plato was talking about a utopian, a theoretical, perfect world. And so I know the practical criticisms may be a little off the mark, but what's the point of having a theoretical world thought up and designed and written out if it'll never work in practice?
I agree. Good thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah. Deep thoughts.
Yes, very deep. The next story is that of the prince's trial. Drona's pupils had now completed their training, and so a tournament was held to exhibit their skills, and many royal people were present, including Kunti, the mother of the Pandavas. A never-before-seen display of expertise was then shown, especially by Arjuna, who never missed a mark with any weapon that he used. However, a great noise was then heard, for Arjuna's rival Karna had entered the ring, and Kunti shuddered, for he was her son also, whom she had given up many years ago, and he was a son of the sun itself. Karna challenged Arjuna to single combat, and Arjuna swore he would kill him, but before they fought, the master of ceremonies intervened, for Karna could not compete unless he showed royal lineage. However, Duryodhana, king of Anga, declared that he would state Karna as the king of Anga instead, for he was eager to see Arjuna defeated, and so it was decided that Karna and Arjuna would fight the next day. Karna's father Ardhyaratha then approached him, and the crowd laughed, for how could a king be the son of a royal charioteer? So I'm going to read these next couple sections from the book. But before anyone could speak, Duryodhana leapt forward once again, having pledged eternal support and friendship to Karna. "We do not know the lineage of all heroes," he shouted to the crowd. "Who asks for the source of a river?" And to the cheers of the gathering, he wrapped his arms around Karna's shoulders and helped his aged father to a seat. The princes and Karna left together. Kunti stared quietly at her sons, princes and now a king. She said nothing and watched them leave, undefeated and grand in every sense. Kunti looked then to the sun and smiled. So that's the end of this little snippet. We don't actually hear the outcome of this tournament, who wins the one-on-one combat. The next story we'll hear will flash forward several years. But I think what is interesting about this story is that kind of what we see in the character of Karna kind of directly contradicts what exactly you were saying just a second ago. He's kind of breaking out of the caste system. This sort of kind king, says, well, I want to see him compete. He is now king. I am no longer king. Kind of this selfless, bringing him up out of this place as the lowly son of a charioteer. So it's very interesting that Karna's kind of painted as the bad guy here. But I guess it's more so coming from the perspective of the Indian people of the time. The caste system was right and just, and anyone who dared to break out of it was kind of scorned, I guess.
Right. Yeah, it's a fun little story, and it kind of leaves it as a cliffhanger, because the summary doesn't tell us. Did they fight? They fight the next day, and who got killed, or did anybody get killed? Who won? I have to Google it afterwards. I don't know if we ever get around to it in the future chapters.
Well, they're both alive in the next story, so I think safe to say nobody was killed. But who knows? Maybe it's possible.
Actually, they died, I guess, unless they're still bouncing around India.
I guess that's true. But it is interesting that I kind of just to restate my point that Karna is presented as the bad guy, where I'm really rooting for this guy now. I mean, he's basically nobody, and he stands up to what is essentially the most powerful prince in the world, and he's saying, I want to fight him. I want to compete with him, see if he's really all that he says he is. And then this king, stands up for him, and he's still sort of portrayed as the bad guy here, and I'm not sure if I really like that part of the story.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely a different twist on it.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It's kind of like the theory. I keep going back to stupid 80s movies, but the theory that the Empire is actually the good guys and defeating the rebellion. And if it weren't for two things, they'd have a better argument. One being the blowing up of an entire planet. That probably crosses a certain line, with the Death Star.
I think so.
And then secondly, the murder of all the baby Jedi, the kindergarten or whatever. That, I think, keeps you from ever claiming to be on the side of justice. But, Darth Vader redeemed himself just by that one act of throwing the Emperor off the cliff of the Death Star. So then he's a floating, god or whatever.
I have heard you rant about this so many times. You hate that part in the prequels.
I hate that in the prequels, and I hate that I like stories of redemption, and up until when he died, that was a good story, because he gave his life to save his son. He realized the error of his ways, and he did what he could at the end. But boy, I don't think that makes up for any of that stuff. And he murdered a lot of people, and then to have him, and that's what the prequel really ruined it, because they didn't show him necessarily indiscriminately killing a lot of people. He choked the one guy with his Jedi choking thing,
yes.
But he didn't kill him, at that meeting. And so you didn't see a whole lot of really terrible killings directly ordered or done by him, except for in the prequels. And it's like, oh my God, he murdered children.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. Little Jedi children. Hey, Anakin, what's wrong? Zap! Anakin, why did you do that to him? Zap! Run for your lives!
We've completely removed ourselves from the Indian mythology here, but there is an amazing sort of sketch that I've seen where it's like, as Order 66 is happening, as all the Jedi are being killed and whatever, the Emperor calls Anakin Skywalker. And he's like, okay, here's our plans moving forward. I was thinking about all the younglings. We can just retrain them and make them into Sith themselves. You did what to the younglings? And it's just that sort of thing. He's just so surprised that he would do that.
Oh, no. I didn't mean that.
All right, going back to the tales of the Mahabharata.
How did I get on that?
I don't know how we got there.
With the Empire.
Yes.
Because it twists the good guy and the bad guy in the story.
Yes. Yes.
The other guy's a good guy, but the story is kind of primed so that who I think is a bad guy is a good guy.
Yes, that's true. That's how we got there. Yes.
Whew.
Yes. And now going back to the stories of the Mahabharata, the last story in this section is about the bride of the Pandavas. So much time had now passed, and the Pandavas had gone into hiding in the guise of Brahmins, when an old friend told them that the king of the Panchalas was planning a Swamyavana for the hand of his daughter Draupadi. The following day, they sent out for let me look up this name here really quick. I cannot read my handwriting. They set out for Kampilya, the capital of Drupada, and this is where the competition was taking place. And alone in his castle, King Drupada of the Panchalas grew very worried about the suitors who would be competing for the hand of his daughter, for he had secretly wished for Arjuna to marry Draupadi, and so he decided to make the competition an archery trial to shoot 5 arrows through a small ring. Many men tried, but none could even bend the bow, until Karna came forward, who had arrived with King Duryodhana. However, as soon as Draupadi saw him, she sneered, saying that she would never marry the son of a charioteer, so Karna returned to the crowd. Then, to everyone's surprise, an apparent Brahmin stepped forward, lifting the bow with ease and firing 5 arrows through the ring in an instant. Draupadi claimed this man as her lord. A fight then broke out, as the other suitors were very jealous that this man had claimed what they believed was rightfully theirs, and Arjuna stood with his brother Bhima, who fended off the masses with an uprooted tree, a trick that he had learned from Drona. It was then that they were revealed as the Pandavas and forced to flee back home into hiding. going to read these last few sentences from the book here. Unknown to the brothers, Draupadi's twin brother had been sent by King Drupada to hide in the next room in order to find out whether it was indeed Arjuna who had strung that bow and sent the arrow so smoothly through the ring. Kunti greeted the princess warmly and welcomed her to the family, allowing her the honor of cooking for them on that first night. Nearby, Drishtadyumna, the twin brother, lay waiting, his ears pricked for news. If his sister was to marry a Pandava, whatever fate would befall her. We're again left on a little bit of a cliffhanger here. That's the last story in this section. So we're unknown what's going to happen with this bride and Arjuna of the Pandavas. But it's very interesting, this sort of massive trial to compete for the hand of a daughter of a king. Almost reminds me a little bit of what we were looking at with the Odyssey. Not that it was like an organized trial or an organized sort of competition, but you did just have these mass amounts of men showing up to the home of Odysseus's wife just to try to compete for her hand or ask for her hand in marriage. So it's very sort of similar there, sort of these old-fashioned ways of trying to find someone worthy of marriage, I guess.
It reminded me of the English knights, the jousting and that kind of stuff, and also The Court Jester, the movie with Danny Kaye.
That is an amazing movie.
I liked in this that when she says, "I'm not going to marry you to Karna," because you're the son of the church. The book says he managed to smile and shrugged his shoulders and returned to the crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what I mean?
I mean, it's again another point in Karna's favor. He doesn't start a fight. He doesn't argue with her. He's just like, well, if that's what you want, I guess I'll deal with it.
Yeah, I don't want to marry some woman that doesn't want me. Get stuck cooking dinner for this other guy that night, but it was an honor.
It was an honor.
Honor of cooking dinner for the family that night.
Yes.
I need to instill some Indian philosophy or what do you call it? Traditions upon my family. My wife would feel honored to cook for me. Although she did cook tonight.
Oh, well, that's very nice.
Excellent tacos.
Ooh, very nice. To go back to the Indian mythology, this is just complete random thought there. Thank you for sharing that.
Didn't you catch it? That Kunti greeted the princess warmly and welcomed her to the family, allowing her the honor of cooking for them.
Yes, I understand that part. I was just saying the part where you were talking about the tacos you ate earlier was completely random. I understand the part about the honor.
Random, that was directly related. In modern American society, that would not be considered an honor necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
I think some families it would be.
True.
Like if it's a lot of families, I guess. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, especially if it's the mother-in-law says, "Okay, well you can, the kitchen's yours." That would be kind of an honor in a lot of families, I guess. So I'd take it back.
That is true.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's kind of interesting to see here. The trial itself was shooting the arrows through the ring. That's exactly what the young Pandavas saw when they first met Drona. So it's kind of to tie it back to the beginning of where they began was Drona shooting an arrow through his own ring in the bottom of a well and retrieving it. So it's kind of a coming full circle sort of effect that we see here, that they're now as good as, or at least Arjuna is as good as Drona at this point, that he can shoot through these tiny little holes, these tiny rings. It's also sort of interesting. What?
Foreshadowing in the story. Yes.
Yes, lots of foreshadowing. I do think it would be a very funny scene to see these two dudes who look essentially like priests to be fighting off these hordes of people with an uprooted tree. I'm sure that would have been a very, very interesting sight to see back in ancient India.
Mm-hmm. Well, in Robin Hood, the Errol Flynn movie, they secreted themselves into the Sheriff of Nottingham's castle by dressing as monks that were at the wedding. And then they went, ha! They pulled out their swords. So I think they borrowed that from the Mahabharata story.
It's possible. It's also probably more possible that it was taken from an original Robin Hood story written in Europe.
The story could have come from this?
That is true. There are a whole bunch of theories about sort of the spread of mythologies and that sort of thing. There's a whole branch of comparative mythology kind of figuring out sort of what I was talking about earlier, but the sort of idea of archetypes. Maybe they're not just, archetypes that we think of. Maybe the idea of this one god was transferred to people to the other side of the planet. Like I know there's there's theories that some Indian gods are the same gods that we see in Irish mythology or Celtic mythology, just under different names and with slightly different traditions. So I mean, it is possible that these stories are just transferred, or bits and pieces are taken and turned into new things. Absolutely.
Or it could just be like if you have a religious sect that devotes itself to studying the Word of God, they're less likely to be, somebody that's going to pull out a sword or a bow and arrow and strike you down.
That is true. That is true.
Ah, oh my gosh, there's that priest. But anyway, I digress. So what do you think overall of these stories? We're at the end, right?
Yes, that was the last story.
Now's the time for you to give your thoughts, because you never like to give your thoughts before we go through.
Well, I'd hate to spoil the rest of the podcast, because then they could just watch the first minute and then turn it off, and we want that listen time. But yeah, I like these stories. They're very brief little snippets. I'm definitely interested in at some point reading the Mahabharata, or possibly sections of it. I don't know if I can ever get through the longest epic poem ever written. But it's very interesting. Kind of what Jake Jackson mentions in the beginning is that it's not really focused on gods. It's really focused on people and sort of their exploits in this sort of mythical world, or the prehistory world, which I think is very interesting. Usually when you find these big, long texts of world mythologies, they're all about the gods and what the gods are doing and their relations and how things came to be. But really what the major focus of the Mahabharata is humans, which I think is very interesting and very notable as the work.
Yeah. Good thoughts, Adam. Good thoughts.
Thank you. What are your thoughts beyond the fact that you wish Mom would gladly make you dinner more often?
She should consider it an honor. That's the thing. It's that not just want her to cook, which would be nice, but that she would consider it an honor as opposed to an obligation or something she doesn't want to do. Of course, I don't know that the last time I cooked for her, but that's just because she doesn't want to cook. But in any event, back to the story. They're different. They're different. I think your points are really, really good about these mythological stories are not about superpowers and that kind of stuff as you talked about, but also that the different values. That jumping off the thumb was a morality tale, but the conclusion is he was protecting his students from this usurper, essentially, and there's a moral element in that too. I just don't agree with it, but it's certainly a morality tale that, hey, know your place and don't go out to the woods and get better and then act like you want to be my student, because the price of admission is going to be too high for you. Mm-hmm. Meaning that you're going to be disabled so that you can't be a student. Yeah. It's really just horrible, but whatever.
It is definitely a unique set of morality tales. Very different, like you were saying, from anything we'd hear from America or a lot of European places. I mean, I'm sure it was more prevalent, hundreds and hundreds of years ago to have stories about this is your place and know your place than it is and from any point forward. But you look like you disagree with that slightly.
Well, I'm just thinking. I mean, there's still a lot of those stories too, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, these are examples of that. I just found that those storylines unexpected. Mm-hmm. For something that's a seminal piece of literature from a society. I mean, the people chose to keep writing this or keep studying this over the centuries, and it just seems kind of like an odd to me, based on where I'm at, that this would be something that you want to tell your kids and grandkids and that kind of stuff.
I think it is the national epic poem of India. Like, it has that declared sort of official status, and I think it is one of the most studied works of all time, alongside the Bible and other, major religious or mythological texts. So,
Isn't that wild?
It is wild. Do you have any other thoughts on the tales of the Mahabharata?
You're going to end up reading. The question is when you're going to find time. I wonder how many pages that would be, like in just regular text.
Oh, I don't know. I haven't looked it up. I'm in the middle of reading the Kalevala right now, which is a book of Finnish epic mythology. So not Indian, but Finnish. Very interesting.
How many pages is the Kalevala?
Kalevala, what was that? This is like 500-ish, somewhere around there.
Big one.
Yeah.
I'm reading an old Hemingway novel.
Mm.
I've never read any of the Hemingway, or if I did, I forgot them all. It's good. Not bad.
Which one? Give us your brief book review.
Well, I'm not through it yet. It's The Sun Also Rises.
Mm.
And it's so far it's a really neat character study of very cynical, detached people, and I'm enjoying it. So it's great. I'm probably about 40% of the way through.
I guess
there's a bunch of offensive language in it, which it was jarring. Anti-Semitic and racist language, which you wouldn't normally, it's like, whoa, okay, wow, all right, well, let's just kind of pass that by. And, but I mean, the anti-Semitic thing was important for one particular character, but the racist stuff was just really kind of just thrown in. I bet it was written, in the 1930s, I guess?
Mm-hmm. It would have been around that time, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, just a different world. It's like, oh okay. Well, just ignore that and move on. Mm-hmm. So, but other than that, it's I've said not bad. I'm joking because, he's supposed to be like one of the best writers, ever or whatever, best novels. But it is really good. And I usually don't like classics.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but this got me sucked in. So,
well, that's good.
Buy some more. Yeah. Just making conversation at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this really has nothing to do with what we were talking about. But do you have any other closing thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience?
No.
I will say you can follow us on Twitter at ULMTD Opinions. That's ULMTD Opinions. And, of course, we announced this a while back, but we did have a t-shirt winner for Season 2, and that t-shirt has now shipped, so congratulations to Sean of the Mythos and Logos podcast, another mythology podcast that I've listened to. It's a good podcast. Very good.
The contest was sponsored by the Wegman Law Firm, so I'm putting that in there so that I can take that as an expense. For all your legal needs.
That is fantastic. Thank you.
If any of our listeners need an attorney in the Jefferson County, Missouri, or surrounding area, call me.
Thank you for that brief ad there. I appreciate it.
We sponsored the t-shirt contest for this podcast.
Yes. Well, I have been Adam Bishop.
I'm still Mark Bishop.
Check out the Wegman Law Firm, apparently, our new sponsor for the podcast.
Only for the contest. And we should mention that the winner of the contest made an ignorant, insulting comment about
yes.
That was the contest, is that the first person who insulted us got it. Can you pull up the insult quickly?
I can very quickly. Keep talking while I'm pulling this up.
And I didn't know if the contest would work, because if somebody really insulted you, they aren't going to want to give you their mailing address. But evidently, it may have been tongue-in-cheek, or he is really wanting this T-shirt. It's not a bad T-shirt,
yes.
And has our logo on the front, and it has your quote in the back, which is...
That is very fascinating, or something along those lines, because you keep making fun of me for saying incredibly fascinating and those sorts of things.
Incredibly fascinating is what it is.
Yes. Well, here's the tweet that was tweeted at us, the lovely disparaging comment. At Unlimited Opinions, #podcast always has something to say, but is somehow always #wrong. I found the login for my old Twitter just to tell them how wrong they are. It should be called #dumblimited, #stupidians, #worst podcast ever. That is just so amazing. Thank you, Sean, for telling us that.
Well, I wanted to have that as the quote on the back. I thought that would have been better.
Maybe in future shirts we can incorporate notable quotes. So stay tuned for more seasonal shirts.
Yeah, we'll have to start writing down really cool stuff we say.
Yeah.
Or ridiculous, foolish things that we say, and we can kind of give a list.
Yes, true.
Or if we get more wide known, if there's more people to listen to them, I'm sure we'll get a lot more negative comments.
That's true. It's true.
Then we can just incorporate a number of them. But our season is not yet over, so we don't have another contest.
So no contest, at least for another few weeks. It'll be a little bit, a few months.
God, that long?
Well, this has been Unlimited Opinion.